Chapter 407, The True Adorer. Inside the Harvest Church, Klein tilted his head to glance at Emlin White. Without ruining the serene atmosphere, he deliberately suppressed his voice and laughed, returning with a question. "Are you short on money?" As soon as the words left his mouth, he felt as if he were asking if Emlin knew about the multi-level marketing company, Amway. Emlin was first taken aback before he scoffed. "Don't insult a noble sanguine with money." Klein instantly sneered. Looking at the tall and brawny Father Atravski in front of him, he said rather casually, "According to what I know, those handmade dolls are not cheap. They can even be called expensive, especially those that are as tall as a human." Emlin gaped his mouth in an attempt to retort, but he failed to say a word. After a moment of silence, he coughed lightly, feigned indifference, and said, "Tell me, what is it that you want my help with? I'm not a sanguine who likes riddles." Klein didn't look at the vampire next to him. He smiled and said, "I have a friend who is about to advance. He needs to collect the relevant beyonder ingredients. I wonder if you can help." "Are you doubting the capabilities of a sanguine?" Emlin White said arrogantly. "Even if I don't have them, I can write and inquire from the nobler excellencies." "That's what I want." Klein immediately responded with a deluge of words: mutated pituitary gland of 1,000-faced hunter and 100 ml of its blood. Characteristic of a human-skinned shadow and 5 strands of a deep-sea naga. As long as I can get any of these, I will pay you the corresponding price. The cheaper the price, the more you will be rewarded. He purposefully increased the number of supplementary ingredients to avoid any losses. Upon hearing this description without any stuttering, Emlin White suddenly felt as if he had fallen into a trap of sophistry. He calmed his emotions and said, "The cost for the beyonder ingredients is at least 100 pounds, while supplementary ingredients are at least 10 pounds. Although I'm not clear of the level of the things you want, I believe that they're definitely not cheap or common. Otherwise, you wouldn't have come to me for help." "Very smart." Klein laughed. "Deal." At this moment, Emlin White had a deep suspicion that he was asking for too little. Therefore, he added, "Mr. Detective, do you have any clues on removing the psychological cues?" Seeing that Father Atravski was concentrating on his prayers at the altar ahead of them, Klein turned to glance at the vampire and said, "I have the simplest method." "What?" Emlin White's red eyes lit up. "Defeat Bishop Atravski and snatch his mental terror candle away," Klein said with a chuckle. "After you meet up with your parents, you should possess the strength needed. Are 3 sanguines not the match of a single Dawn Paladin?" The corners of Emlin's mouth twitched as his expression collapsed. "We lost. We couldn't beat him. My parents were nearly captured. That mental terror candle is really strange." "So you've already tried." The entire family almost converted to become believers of Earth Mother. 3 sanguines weren't even able to defeat Father Atravski. With the help of the mental terror candle and the blood transfuser, Father Atravski is that terrifying? Or are vampires too weak? However, all the rumors point towards vampires being rather powerful. Klein said in thought, "Then you can write a letter and ask for the help of the noble excellencies. There shouldn't be a lack of powerful experts among the sanguine." Emlin White answered with a numb expression. They refused. Suddenly, he looked at Klein with hope. "Can you defeat Father Atravski, or could your friend beat him?" After receiving the sun brooch and the biological poison bottle and digesting most of the potion, I originally thought that I would be able to defeat Father Atravski in my spirit-body state. However, your description just now made me uncertain. Is the mental terror candle that bizarre? This kind of sealed artifact is obviously great at restraining spirit bodies. Klein rationally shook his head. "No way." He quickly changed the subject. "Why would those noble excellencies of the sanguine refuse your request? To them, this should be a simple favor." Emlin White's face instantly turned ashen. "They say that Father Atravski is a blessed of Earth Mother. They do not wish to enter into direct conflict with him. They are studying means to remove the psychological cue. For example, they are venturing deep into the Sanya Sea, the Fog Sea, and the Berserk Sea in search of the dragons that have long secluded themselves." He added with a smile even uglier than a weeping face, "By the time they figure it out, or find a dragon well-versed in the psyche domain, I might have already become a devout believer of Earth Mother. I'm beginning to appreciate how precious life is and how joyful a harvest is. A blessed of Earth Mother? Father Atravski is a blessed of Earth Mother. It's no wonder that he has so many mystical items. From the looks of it, as a powerful pirate, suddenly switching to the Earth Mother wasn't a simple matter. Klein sighed, and then he felt a sense of lingering fear. He had almost agreed to Emlin White's request to attempt to defeat Father Atravski. If I lose, then I might even be locked up in the basement and forced into confinement. If I win, I might just offend another deity. No, there's no way of me winning. The Blessed of Earth Mother definitely has an appropriate trump card. If it wasn't for Father Atravski suppressing his split personality, then I probably wouldn't have been able to defeat him. Klein wisely didn't pursue the topic. He once again looked at Father Atravski and said, "You can try to find an organization called the Psychology Alchemists. Otherwise, you'll have to wait for Miss Justice of our tarot club to become a psychiatrist. By then, you might be reluctant to break away from the faith of Earth Mother." Klein silently added. To him, it was best if Emlin White also joined the Psychology Alchemists. That way, if Miss Justice encountered any problems in the organization, he could help her with other resources, and Klein wouldn't always have to summon himself, who was the trinity of the fool, a blessed, and a believer. Psychology Alchemists? I've never heard of it. Emlin shook his head disdainfully. It must be a secret organization that recently appeared. This organization has existed for 100 or 200 years, at the very least. Klein denied his statement. For a sanguine with a long lifespan, 100 or 200 years means it recently appeared. Among the noble excellencies, a nap might be as long as a century, Emlin White said proudly. Without waiting for Klein to speak, he looked ahead, cleared his throat, and said, "Do you know how to contact that organization?" Klein was going to answer that there was a man in the Tingen City's asylum named Dr. Daxter Guderian, who's a member of the Psychology Alchemists, but he stopped those words just before they came out of his mouth. With the true creator targeting me, it's best that I don't get involved with people or matters in Tingen. There's a certain risk of exposure, and once exposed, with the Aurora Order's madness, they would definitely not let Benson and Melissa go. Klein slightly shook his head and said, "I've only heard of this organization." "You can write and ask the other sanguine." Emlin White was disappointed and stopped talking about it. He turned his head to look at Klein and said, "I'm guessing your friend who's about to advance is you." Klein looked forward without a care and replied leisurely, "Congratulations, you got it right." Emlin White was stunned. This was completely different from what he had expected. Noticing his change, Klein laughed softly. "Mr. White, the most suitable job for you isn't to be an apothecary, but to be an actor." Emlin was stunned at first, but he immediately raised his head arrogantly and said, "I'm a deep, noble sanguine. I don't rely on my looks to make a living." "Do you think I'm praising you for being handsome?" Klein slowly stood up and laughed. "No, I mean, you're very talented at comedy." While Emlin White's expression froze, he squeezed his way out to the aisle and said, "Don't forget what I entrusted you with." Prits Harbor, White Oak Street. Fors Wall took the steam locomotive early in the morning and arrived at the kingdom's largest and most important port. She had also booked tickets for her return trip by boat, which was relatively inexpensive. Taking in the smell of the sea, Fors saw many of the dockworkers who were in a hurry. In the middle of each season, the port was swarming with temporary workers for relatively decent pay, and many poor people living in Backland's East Borough would head southeast on foot and in groups, traveling a distance of more than 60 kilometers. This was the same thing they did when harvesting hops. The roads are wider than Backland's, and the air quality isn't bad, but it's relatively dirtier. Fors looked around and found the Fishermen Association in an old building. Without much trouble, she met Dorian Gray in an office. The gentleman was of medium build, with exaggerated arms. His hair was combed rather neatly, completely unlike most of the members of the association who had hairstyles that looked like bird nests. He should also be an Abraham family member. After explaining the purpose of her visit, Fors passed Lawrence's will, along with the strange notebook and the diamond-like beyonder characteristic. Dorian received the items with a complicated expression before opening the will first. After reading it carefully, he lifted his head and looked earnestly at Fours with his blue eyes. Your kindness and honor are praiseworthy. Ms. Wall, I shall always remember the help you provided Alyssa and Lawrence. Can you accept my gratitude? I wish to invite you to lunch. No problem. Fours was still wondering how to pass the time before her ship sailed. Dorian immediately arranged for her to wait in the next lounge, offering black tea, snacks, newspapers, and magazines. Returning to the office, the gentleman opened a hidden cabinet with some misgivings and took out an item. It was a pure crystal ball shining with a radiant light.